The Paper Cowboy by Kristen Levine. Chapter 1. The Paper. Hands up. My best friend Eddie Sullivan had a newspaper rolled and pointed at me like a gun. He was only 12, but over the summer he'd grown so much. He looked big enough to be in high school. No way, I called out. I grabbed the newspaper and tried to wrench it from him. My dog, Boots, started to bark, excited. He was a small, scruffy black mutt with paws as white as frost on the prairie. Surrender, you little commie, Eddie said, and I might let you live. I'm not a communist. Eddie pretended to shoot me with the newspaper. I fell down, laughing. Stalin's dead. But the Soviet Union is not giving up. I'm not going to let you take over the world. We were standing on a mountain of newspapers. To our right, a glass bottle hill glowed brown and green in the sunlight. A bit farther on loomed a pile of tin cans, 10 feet tall, with the labels burned off so that the metal sparkled like the silver on a sheriff's star. Eddie grabbed one of my shoes and started to pull. I was laughing so hard, I could barely swat him away. Help, Boots! My dog jumped into the fray, nipping at Eddie's ankles. It was the day of our community paper drive, when everyone placed their old papers and magazines by the side of the road. Eddie and I had spent all morning following the collection truck, watching his father swing the piles onto the truck bed. After lunch, we followed the truck on our bikes to the scrapyard. The truck would be driven onto a big scale, and the homeowners association would receive a certain amount of money for every pound of paper that had been collected. While we were waiting for our turn on the scale, Eddie and I climbed onto our truck and started poking around. You dirty Eddie's voice cracked. So high it sounded like my little sister. He cleared his throat. You dirty commie, he said, his voice now deep like his father's. Boots sank his teeth into Eddie's shirt and pulled him away. But Eddie didn't let go of my shoe, which came off, and I tumbled down the hill of papers. We were both laughing so hard, it took me a moment to get my breath. Eddie was standing on top of the pile, holding the shoe over his head like a trophy. Boots was chasing him around in circles, barking. Victory! Yelled Eddie. I was about to scramble up the pile and join back in the fight when the headline caught my eye. The war ends. Even though it was now September 13th, 1953, finding an old newspaper wasn't so unusual. No, it was the masthead that intrigued me, the Daily Worker. Eddie, I called, come quick. Eddie slid down the hill, loose papers flying around him. What is it, Tommy? I held the paper out to him. The Daily Worker was a communist paper. I knew that from the movies, and I found a copy, lying right beside my shoeless foot. A commie newspaper? Eddie's eyes were wide, his cheeks smudged with newsprint. Do you know what this means? I asked. What? There's a communist in Downers Grove. That was the little town where we lived, just a commuter train ride from Chicago. Eddie gave me a look. Just think about it. These papers all came from our neighborhood. That means one of our neighbors, I paused and lowered my voice, must be a communist. Eddie looked around, as if he expected to see a Soviet spy parachuting down from the sky. If a Russian caught you, he'd torture you until you agreed to spy on the United States. Sure, it was bad that there was a communist in the town, but it was a little bit exciting too, like when you hear about a fire. You hope no one is hurt, and you feel bad if they lost all their belongings. But something so thrilling about seeing that fire truck go by with all the bells ringing. It's like the time you convinced everyone the old shack by the pond was haunted, and it turned out there was just raccoons inside, asked Eddie. No, I protested. This is proof. I waved the newspaper. Eddie's dad yelled at us to get off the truck then. Mr. Sullivan had come back from the war in Korea with a bad limp, but his arms were as thick and strong as a man at the circus. He always helped with paper drive because no one could swing the stacks of newspaper onto the truck quite like him. I rolled up the paper I'd found and stuffed it into my back pocket. Eddie handed me my shoe and I put it on. Hey, Tommy, Mr. Sullivan said. You want to come by and see the bomb shelter I built? Love to, I said, but I gotta get home to dinner. It's his birthday, Eddie volunteered. He's finally 12 like me. Well then, happy birthday. Tell your dad we should all go fishing again soon. Will do, I said as I jumped on my bike and pedaled off. You'd think I'd be excited about my birthday. I mean, last week, Dad had brought home a box that was just the right shape and size to hold a pair of genuine leather cowboy boots. Mom had promised to make pierogi, and I loved the half-circle dumpling noodles filled with mashed potatoes and cheese. There would probably be an angel food cake, too, with a sweet fruit glaze on the top. But Biza, that's Polish for grandma, wouldn't be there. She'd died a few months before, right about the same time Susie was born. And that's when Mom really started to change. I mean, she'd always been moody, but now she was like a sky full of dark clouds. Sometimes things would clear right up without a drop of rain, and other times there'd be lightning and hail. Never quite knowing what the weather would be like at home made my palms sweat. And as I turned into our driveway and walked my bike to the garage, from inside the house, I could already hear screaming. Chapter 2, The Birthday Dinner. I stood outside the front door for a moment, wiping my hands on my pants, trying to decide what to do. I wanted to go back to Eddie's house, see the shelter his dad had built in case the Soviets dropped an atomic bomb on us. But if I didn't show up for dinner on my birthday, my mother would call his mother, and that would just cause more problems. So I took a deep breath and opened the front door. My dad was sitting on the couch reading the paper, as if he couldn't hear a thing. He was a foreman at Western Electric and usually wore a suit and tie, with a shirt starched at the dry cleaner. Even on the weekends, my dad was tall and thin and looked a bit like Gary Cooper in High Noon. I'd seen that movie 5 times when it was at the Tivoli. The screaming was coming from the kitchen. From what I could hear, it sounded like something Mom was cooking had not turned out the way she'd expected. "Well, hello, Tommy," Dad said without looking up. The dark frames of his reading glasses made his face look even thinner than normal. "What's going on?" I asked. "I'm not going in there to find out," Dad said, turning the page of the paper. This was usually the best approach when Mom was in a bad mood. We all tried to stay out of her way. I was just about to sneak off to my room when my mom called. "Is that you, Tommy?" I groaned. Ignoring Mom when she asked you a direct question only made things worse. "Yeah, it's me," I said. Mom came to the door between the kitchen and the living room. She usually wore her long black hair pinned up into a neat bun, but lots of strands had escaped the bun today, and the flowered apron she wore seemed too bright for her tense mood. She put her hands on her hips. "Where have you been?" Dad rolled his eyes. "Don't you roll your eyes at me," Mom barked. "It's his birthday," Dad said. "You don't need to interrogate him. He came home because it's dinner time." Mom's face turned red, a vein popping out of her forehead. "Dinner will be ready in a minute," she shouted. "The first set of pierogi didn't turn out right." Dad didn't respond, just turned another page of the newspaper. "I'm sure they're fine," I said, trying to smooth things over. But as soon as Mom turned to look at me, I knew it was the wrong thing to say. "You don't appreciate my effort," Mom snapped. Her normally hazel eyes blazed emerald green. "I was trying to make them perfect for you." There was nothing I could say. Mom stomped into the kitchen and then came back carrying a pan of pierogi. "You think they're fine? Take them." She threw a pierogi at me. It hit me on the stomach. I stared in surprise. Mom yelled all the time, but she'd never thrown anything before. My dad finally put the paper down. "Catherine!" A noodle hit him on the shoulder. Mom kept throwing. Soon there were noodles all over the floor, blending in with the beige carpet. "Stop it!" cried Dad. I giggled uncomfortably. "Oh, you think it's funny, do you?" Mom asked. "No," I said. But she was already storming back to the kitchen. She returned with the cake in her hands. "Then you might as well have the cake, too." She threw it. The delicate angel food cake crumbled against the living room wall. "That's enough," said Dad. It wasn't even a little funny anymore. She was scaring me. Mom disappeared once more and returned carrying a large shoebox. "And here's your present." She tossed the box onto the coffee table. It slid across the table and fell to the floor. The lid popped off and I could see the genuine leather cowboy boots I'd wanted inside. But getting the boots didn't feel as good as I'd expected. Didn't feel good at all. In the back room, I could hear my baby sister start to cry. At the sound of crying, Mom seemed to collapse, as if she were a puppet and the string holding her up had suddenly been snipped. "I have a headache," she said. "I'm going to sleep." She stomped off and slammed her bedroom door. I looked over at Dad, but his expression was blank as a cowboy playing poker. "What's wrong with Mom?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Dad shook his head. "She's just tired. She wanted to make your birthday special." It was a lame excuse, and I think he knew it, because he wouldn't meet my eye. The baby kept crying, but Dad just knelt down and started picking up the pierogi. So I went into the kitchen and mixed up a bottle and walked to the nursery. If you asked me, my littlest sister, Susie, who was 3 months old, still looked like a wrinkled raisin, but everyone else thought she was cute. Her face was bright red, her tiny fists flailing as she fought off the covers. "Hey, Susie," I said. I picked her up. She quieted a little, and I held her to my chest. She smelled nice, like baby powder, but then she shoved a fist into her mouth, sucked it twice, and began wailing again. I gave her the bottle, and she gurgled happily. It made me feel a little better. I carried Susie into the hall and stood still for a moment. My heart was pounding. So I hadn't gotten my birthday dinner. So what? A cowboy wouldn't be upset. Heck, I bet a cowboy didn't even celebrate his birthday. But I was disappointed. And even worse, I was mad at myself for feeling that way. What I really wanted was to talk to Mary Lou. She always made me feel better. I could hear water running and realized my older sister was probably hiding out in the bathroom, giving Pinky her bath. I knocked on the bathroom door. "It's me." "Come in," called Mary Lou. I didn't close the door behind me, giving a little sigh as I leaned against it. Mary Lou was sitting on a low stool next to the tub. She was 13, a year ahead of me in school, with brown hair. She usually wore braids. I guess she was pretty, but I could only tell because Eddie could never put two sentences together when she was around. I knew boys were supposed to think their sisters were dull and stupid, but I liked mine. Mary Lou smiled when she saw me, a big, happy, genuine grin. But I must have looked pale or something because she asked, "You okay?" "Fine," I lied. "But Mom started throwing things." "Shh," Mary Lou whispered. "Tell me later. Not in front of Pinky." Pinky was our other little sister, and she was 4. Her real name was Barbara, but the nurse who had delivered her had remarked, "She's so pink," and the name had stuck. "Happy birthday," Pinky exclaimed, splashing in the tub. "Thanks," I said. "Mom made a cake," Pinky added. "She said I could have a piece." I didn't know how to tell her that my birthday cake was now lay smashed to bits on the living room floor. So instead, I changed the subject. "Look what I found," I said brightly. I balanced Susie in the crook of one arm and pulled the newspaper out of my back pocket. A commie newspaper. "Ooh," said Pinky. She didn't know what that meant, of course, but she'd caught my excitement, and she'd forgot about the cake, which of course was what I had intended. "Let me see that," Mary Lou said. "Careful," I said, "your hands are wet." Mary Lou wiped them on the towel, and I handed the paper over. She scanned it quickly. "Where did you get this?" she asked. "Found it in the paper drive." "Tommy, you have to get rid of this." "Get rid of it?" I exclaimed, surprised. "But I wanted to show the boys at school." "Why?" she asked. "Do you want them to think we're communists?" I laughed. No one would think that. "You should burn it," she said, handing it back to me. "Well, thanks for your advice," I said sarcastically. I was kind of disappointed. I thought she'd be excited, too. Finding the paper was the best thing that had happened today. "I mean it. You're going to get in trouble." "Nah. Tommy, remember last month when you found the BB gun in the woods and—" "Fine," I said. "I'll burn the paper." But I was going to show it to the other boys at school first. After Pinky and Susie had been put to bed, Dad and Mary Lou and I shared a tense and silent dinner of pierogi, sprinkled with carpet fibers. Mom had been right. They weren't very good. The filling had turned out mealy, not at all like Booza used to make them. "Did you like the cowboy boots?" Dad asked gruffly when we were nearly done. "Yeah," I said. "Thanks a lot." He nodded. I waited for him to say something about Mom throwing all the food, but he didn't. Dad took off his glasses, and I could see the fine lines around his eyes. He looked tired. After dinner, Mary Lou and I did the dishes and listened to the Lone Ranger on the radio. I loved how it always started the same way. Return with us now to those thrilling days of yesteryear, and the music and the "Hi-ho, Silver, away!" And I loved how the Lone Ranger's best friends, Tonto, always called him Kimo Sabi, which means trusted friend. I loved how in 30 minutes the bad guys were caught and the problems were solved. When the program was over, Mary Lou shut it off. She smiled, and the freckles on her nose and cheeks popped out. Sometimes, in the right light, her hair had just a tinge of red. "Hey, Tommy," she said, "I've got something for you." She pulled a small newspaper-wrapped package out of her pocket. I smiled. Mom might be unpredictable, but I could always count on Mary Lou. "Take it, stupid," she said, pressing it into my hands. I unwrapped it slowly. It was a silver star-shaped pin, just like the ones the sheriffs wore in the movie. "We might argue sometimes," said Mary Lou, "but you're still my favorite brother." "I'm your only brother." Well, that too. I gave her a hug. Thanks, Kimo-sabi. Sorry you didn't get a cake, she said. I shrugged. It doesn't matter. But it did. Who doesn't want a cake on his birthday? You know, Mom, she said, her voice just a little strained. She'll probably get up in the middle of the night to make you a new one. Yeah, I said, maybe so. Mary Lou yawned. I better go to sleep, she said. Gotta get up early to deliver those papers. I nodded. See you in the morning. Boots padded over to me and then rubbed his head against my leg. I stroked his fur absently, then went to get ready for bed myself. I was just about to climb under the covers when I heard someone moving around the kitchen. Mary Lou was right. Mom had gotten up to bake me another cake. The smell of angel food batter and sweet orange icing lulled me to sleep. Chapter 3. Burning the Trash, Part 1. The angel food cake was waiting on the counter when I woke up, looking light and fluffy, coated with an orange glaze. I wasn't sure how I felt. Glad she'd baked me a replacement, I guess, but it didn't erase the memory of her throwing the first one against the wall. Still, cake was cake, and Dad left early for work, and Mom slept late. So when Mary Lou came back from her paper route, she and Pinky and I each gobbled down a slice. With a glass of milk. It was delicious. We were almost done by the time Mom stumbled into the kitchen, and Mary Lou handed her a cup of coffee. I never knew quite how to react after one of Mom's fits. Sometimes if you looked at her funny, it would set her off again, so I kept my eyes firmly on my plate. I crushed the last bit of white cake with my fork. The cake was so good, Mom, Mary Lou said. Thanks. Mom sounded calm. I risked a glance up. Her eyes were clear. Her fingers didn't tremble as she sipped her coffee. She had her pink robe wrapped around her, and had even taken the time to pull her hair back into a ponytail. Maybe the throwing was a fluke, a one-time thing. The tension slowly drained out of me like a clogged sink. Do you like the cowboy boots? Mom asked. I held up one foot. I was wearing the boots. Mom laughed. You can't wear those to school. I know, I said. I'll change into my shoes after I burn the trash. You see, Mary Lou did the paper route because she was the oldest. But my job was to burn our trash in a pit in the backyard. Newspapers were saved for the paper drive, of course, but there was always tin cans and bits of packaging and brown paper from the dry cleaner. When the fire cooled, we put out the cans and other metal. The Homeowners Association got money for holding scrap metal drives as well. I picked up the trash piled by the back door and walked out to the fire pit. There was a slight September wind, so I put a couple of soup cans on top so the paper wouldn't blow away. Then I threw in the match, just like Dad had shown me. Always make sure it lights before you turn away, he said. He didn't have to tell me to keep my eyes on the fire. I loved the moment when the tiny match ignited the paper and it burst into a big yellow flame. That morning when I got dressed, I rolled up the Daily Worker and stuck it back in my back pocket again. For a moment, I had thought about throwing it into the fire like Mary Lou had told me to do, so I could see the flames jump again. But I didn't. Tommy, hurry up, called Mary Lou from the kitchen. It's almost time for the bus. I ran back to the kitchen. Mom held out a box from the cowboy boots and some more brown paper from the cleaners. You forgot to burn these. I didn't know what to do. I still had to change my shoes. No way the nuns would let me come to school in cowboy boots. But if I said no, it might set Mom off and she'd start yelling again. And if I said yes, I'd miss the bus. And missing the bus would... I'll do it, said Mary Lou, reading my mind and taking the paper from the box from Mom. Thanks, I said. She just shrugged. Get your shoes on. I tucked the copy of the Daily Worker into my school satchel and sat down to pull off my boots. At the time, the moment didn't seem so special, watching Mary Lou walk out to the fire pit, a pile of papers in her arms. But afterward, I kept picturing it again and again. The sun shining on her brown hair, which she had brushed and combed into two neat braids, her navy blue wool-pleated skirt, white blouse, and matching sweater, her polished penny loafers leaving footprints on the wet grass. But the main thing I remember was how lightly she walked, with a little skip in her gait. I realized Mary Lou actually liked burning trash. She'd done it until last year when she'd gotten the paper out. She liked scrunching the paper into balls so it wouldn't blow away, lighting the match and throwing it. And the way the fire would lick across the paper, slowly at first, then bursting all at once, like a tiger lily opening in the morning sun. She threw the match in just like Dad had shown us, and watched a flame catch to make sure no burning paper blew away. Mary Lou, I called, thanks again. She turned then, suddenly to say something mean and teasing to me. I still wonder what it was going to be. You owe me one, Cowboy, or shut up, Tommy, or even simply you're welcome. But I never found out, because as she turned, her pleated skirt flew over the pit. At first, I thought it was just a glare, that the sun was shining on her again, making her glow orange. But then I heard the screams. Chapter 4, Brandon. There are a lot of things I can't remember. How to spell Mississippi, timetables, the capital of Nebraska. Then there are things I don't want to remember, like the ride to the hospital. But that memory is seared in my head, a brand on my brain. At least part of it is. Other parts are gone, like the holes in an old coat, eaten away by moths. Mary Lou was screaming, and then the next thing I knew, Mom was placing her in the front seat of our car, still wrapped in the blanket she'd used to smother the flames, gentle as a mother cat licking her kitten. At some point, I'd gotten the baby, and I'd held her squirming in my arms in the back seat of our car, and though Mary Lou was screaming bloody murder, it was Susie's crying that upset me the most. "Shut up!" I snapped at her finally, and she stopped. Pinky sat still as a rock, her dress covered in oatmeal. I remember waiting at the railroad crossing just a block from the doctor's. A train was chugging by, carrying people going to work, and it was moving slowly. I could see the expression on the passengers' faces. Mom alternated between curse words so bad I'd have my mouth washed out with soap if I had said them, and prayers to the Virgin Mary. Then we were double parked in front of our doctor's office, Mom leaning on the horn. Dr. Stanton ran out to the car with a huge needle, and I knew he was going to stick it into Mary Lou, and for some stupid reason that scared me more than the burns did. I would have started screaming myself, but Susie had fallen asleep, a little warm ball in my chest, and I didn't want to wake her. She felt damp, like she'd soaked through her diaper. The sour smell filled the car, along with something worse, like rotten meat left on a campfire for too long. The hospital was 45 minutes away. The shot made Mary Lou stop screaming, but every time we ran over a bump in the road, she moaned, and that was even worse. We finally got to the hospital, and Mary Lou was put on a stretcher, and someone picked up a corner of a blanket, but her skin came off too, so they put it back down. And then she was wheeled away, my mom rushing after her. Pinky, Susie, and I were left in the reception room, alone. There was a large brown overstuffed couch and a small table in front of it. Pinky had fallen asleep, so I sat down on the couch and rocked Susie back and forth. My mind didn't seem to be working right. I glanced at the clock, and whole chunks of time would disappear. I looked out the window for only a minute or two, and then realized 40 minutes had passed. I said so many Hail Marys, it seemed like those were the only words left in the whole world. "Tommy," Pinky said finally in her tiny voice. "I'm here." She stared at me with wide blue eyes. "There's oatmeal on my dress." I looked at the clock. It was almost noon. "I don't have a change of clothes for you." "It's sticky," Pinky whined. "Shh." But the nurse at the information desk had heard her. She got up and rummaged in a closet, then brought me a plain white gown. "Thanks," I said. "Do you have a spare diaper for the baby?" She nodded and rummaged some more. As she handed me the cloth, she tilted her head and studied my face. "You're the brother of the burned girl," she said, as if the idea had just occurred to her. I nodded. Her lips made a little round O. I could see the lipstick on them. Mary Lou had wanted to wear lipstick, but Mom wouldn't let her. She said it was only for loose women. I wondered what that meant, and if this woman was loose too. "Is Mary Lou going to be okay?" The words were out of my mouth before I realized I was going to say them. If I had, I wouldn't have dared. The nurse pushed her lips together as if she were going to answer, but then she frowned and only said, "There's a courtyard outside. You can change your little sister there." Pinky was happy to put on a fresh dress. It was a beautiful day, the leaves flecked with orange and gold and drops of purple. Pinky ran back and forth under the maple trees, like nothing was wrong, and I had changed Susie's diaper. When Pinky was tired of playing with the leaves, we went back inside and sat on the couch. Susie started crying, and no matter how much I rocked or bounced or sang to her, she wouldn't stop. "I think she's hungry," the nurse said finally. "Yeah," I agreed. "Want me to feed her for you?" I handed Susie over to her, relieved. While they were gone, I read to Pinky from the only book in the waiting room, a collection of Bible stories. She sat still and listened, even though she usually preferred to run around. We made it through the Garden of Eden, Daniel's lion's den, David and Goliath, and were halfway done with Moses parting the Red Sea before she fell asleep in my lap. I held her, unmoving, unthinking, exactly like Lot's wife. I guess at some point I must have fallen asleep too, because when I finally opened my eyes, Mom was standing in the room, as still as a statue. I could tell by the light it was late in the afternoon. Is she okay? I asked. She's alive, Mom said. Pinky woke up, stretched, and rubbed her eyes. Mom! She cried. She scrambled off my lap and hugged Mom's legs. Will she have scars? I asked. Cowboys have scars. Bad guys have scars. Sisters aren't supposed to have scars. Mom slapped my ear. I gasped. Not because it really hurt, but because Mom had never hit us. She yelled all the time, but even if we were really bad, she'd wait for Dad to get home and have him spank us. Mary Lou told me once that Booza had hit Mom all the time when she was little, and Mom had vowed never to be like her. Ouch, I said, rubbing my cheek. Do you want me to slap you again? Mom demanded. I shut up. The nurse brought Susie back then. She took a step toward Mom, then changed her mind and handed Susie to me. I wondered if she'd seen the slap. As soon as we got in the car, Mom started crying. She was sobbing so hard, I wasn't sure how she could see the road. I didn't mean... I started to say. Shut up, she screamed at me. This is all your fault. Most of her hair had fallen out of its bun, and it just hung around her face like dark spider webs. If you'd just taken the trash out like you were supposed to, this wouldn't... It was your job. The rest of the way home, none of us said a word. I held Susie in my arms and Pinky leaned against me. She kept trembling as if she were trying not to cry. My skin itched every time we went over a bump, and I remembered Mary Lou. Mom swerved all over the road, and I couldn't help wondering, if we had a car accident, whose fault would it be, Mom's or mine? Somehow we made it home in one piece. Dad was in the kitchen when we walked in, wearing Mom's flowered apron over his suit and tie. Mrs. Sullivan's brought over a casserole, he said, but I think I burned it. The dish, black and scorched, smoldered on the stovetop. Mom said nothing. Dad cleared his throat. How is... Same as I told you on the phone, Mom said. Dad nodded. The creases in his face seemed deep as a desert canyon. By the time I got the message at work, it was too late to go to the hospital. Mom went straight into the bedroom and shut the door. Dad, Pinky, and I sat on the square kitchen table, eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for dinner. Dad gave Susie a bottle, but awkwardly, so she kept fussing. It was like he'd never fed her before. I tried to remember if he ever had. The table suddenly seemed way too large. I longed for someone to bump into me as they reached for their water glass. The peanut butter stuck to the roof of my mouth, and I was concentrating so hard on prying it off with my tongue, I jumped when the phone rang. Dad stood up slowly to answer it. Hello? He took his glasses out of his pocket and put them on, as if they would somehow help him hear better. Dad let the person on the other end of the line go on and on before he said, We'll let you know if there's any news. More talking on the other end. No need. Tommy can do it. He listened again. Yes, and thank you for the casserole. It was delicious. It must have been Eddie's mom. She knew everyone liked to talk. By morning, all of Downers Grove would know about my sister. Dad hung up and walked slowly back to the table. Do what? I asked. Mary Lou's paper out. Dad picked up another piece of the sandwich and chewed it seriously, as if it demanded his full attention. A blob of jelly dripped out of his mouth onto Mom's flowered apron, which he still hadn't taken off. Me? I wanted to complain, but what could I say? It had been my job to take out the trash. You do know how to do the paper out, don't you? Dad asked, suddenly worried. Of course, I lied. Good, said Dad, and I will burn the trash from now on. He continued eating. Bath time, said Pinky. We looked over. Cleaning her up was Mary Lou's job. I'll do it, I said, getting Pinky down from her high chair. As I gave my sister a bath, every bone in my body ached. It was like I had been thrown by a bucking bronco, even though all I had done was sit in the hospital chair all day. Pinky seemed just as exhausted, not even asking for a story as I tucked her into bed. I brushed my teeth, laid out my clothes for the next day, and set my alarm. I knew Mary Lou got up at 4:30 a.m. each day to do the paper route. The rest I had to figure out as I went along. Boots scrambled into bed with me, and I put my arms around him and buried my nose deep in his dirty fur. If I had imagined real hard, I could picture myself out on the prairie, ready to lay my bedroll under the stars. Boots licked my face, and soon I was asleep. But I woke in the middle of the night to a whisper in my ear. "Tommy," it said, "it was all your fault." No one was there. Boots whined softly, turned over, and resumed his snoring. I closed my eyes and cried myself to sleep.